whenever parents do anything nice, they always wonder if they're doing the right thing.
What if the 20 simple facts behind the most perfect family in American television were actually hiding pressure, control, and moments that nearly shattered the illusion forever? Leave It to Beaver wasn't just comfort TV, it was a carefully constructed reality. And once you uncover what truly happened behind the scenes, everything changes. Number 1. The most expensive episode that forced the show to change direction. When In the Soup aired in 1961, it looked like nothing more than a playful childhood misadventure, but behind that lighthearted story was a production decision that nearly pushed Leave It to Beaver beyond what it could sustain. The setup was deceptively simple: a billboard, a painted bowl of soup, and a moment of curiosity that led Beaver into a risky climb. But creating that illusion required something far more complex. The production team didn't just rely on clever camera angles, they built 2 full-scale structures, one outdoors for realism and another inside a soundstage to safely capture close-up shots. That level of construction dramatically increased costs, pushing the episode close to $50,000, far beyond the usual television budget of the time. The result was visually unforgettable, but the consequences didn't end when filming stopped. That kind of spending forced the producers into a corner, and from that moment forward, the show had to adapt. Expensive spectacle was replaced with tighter storytelling, more dialogue, and a stronger focus on character interaction rather than large-scale setups. In other words, one bold creative decision reshaped the entire production strategy. What makes this episode so important isn't just the scene itself, it's what happened after, when the show quietly shifted from visual ambition to emotional precision, proving that even the most simple sitcom was constantly negotiating between creativity and survival. Number 2. The quiet breaking point that led Jerry Wilde to walk away. Judy Hensler stood out as one of the few characters who could challenge Beaver directly, bringing a sharper, more confident energy into the show, but behind that presence was a young actress experiencing something the series wasn't equipped to handle: real adolescence unfolding in real time. At first, everything worked within the boundaries of childhood storytelling, but as Jerry Wilde began to grow physically, the production faced a choice: adapt or conceal. They chose concealment. Wardrobe adjustments became more restrictive, physical movement was limited, and subtle efforts were made to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. But reality doesn't pause for television. During a baseball scene, that tension reached its peak. Jerry was asked to perform a spin while wearing a long skirt, all while dealing with her first period, an experience that brought not just discomfort, but a deep sense of vulnerability. That moment didn't exist in isolation. It became part of a larger pattern where personal reality clashed with scripted expectations. Over time, the pressure built quietly, without headlines or dramatic confrontations, until it reached a point where continuing no longer made sense. Years later, the narrative was often simplified into rumors of her being fired, but the truth is far more revealing: she chose to leave. That decision exposes a deeper truth about the show's structure. It could preserve the image of childhood, but it struggled when that image no longer matched reality. Number 3. The personal tragedy that changed how Ward Cleaver felt on screen. Ward Cleaver became one of the most recognizable father figures in American television, defined by calm authority and emotional control. But behind that composed image was a man carrying a loss that never fully faded. In 1959, at the height of the show's success, Hugh Beaumont experienced a devastating family tragedy when a car accident took the life of his mother-in-law and left his son seriously injured. From the audience's perspective, nothing changed. Ward remained steady, thoughtful, and reassuring. But behind that consistency was a different reality, one where Beaumont had to step onto the set and perform stability while dealing with grief that couldn't simply be set aside. That contrast created something subtle but powerful. His performance wasn't louder or more emotional, it became quieter, more measured, more restrained. Colleagues later observed that he often seemed distant, not disengaged, but carrying something internal that never fully surfaced. And that internal weight may have contributed to what made Ward feel authentic. Because real authority doesn't always come from energy, it often comes from control. Viewers saw the ideal father, but what they were really witnessing was a man maintaining composure under pressure. That is what gave the character depth, not perfection, but the quiet discipline of holding everything together when life itself had already changed. Number 4. The disappearance that revealed how TV really handles change. When Larry Mondello disappeared from Leave It to Beaver, the show offered no explanation, no narrative closure, and no acknowledgement that anything had changed, leaving viewers to notice the absence without understanding it. But behind that silence was a combination of real-world factors that made his continued presence impossible. Rusty Stevens had become a recognizable part of the show's dynamic, bringing a specific kind of mischievous energy that balanced Beaver's personality. But off-screen, complications were building. Reports of parental interference created tension on set, And when combined with the family's relocation away from California, the situation reached a point where continuing simply wasn't practical. Instead of rewriting the story to explain his exit, the producers chose a different approach, replace the function, not the narrative. That's how Gilbert Bates was introduced, stepping into the role of Beaver's companion while subtly reshaping the dynamic. The transition worked because it was designed to feel seamless, but it also revealed how television often operates. Continuity is not always preserved through explanation, it is maintained through substitution. Larry didn't leave within the story. He was absorbed into the structure of the show itself, replaced without disruption, and that quiet replacement says more about how television adapts than any scripted farewell ever could. Number 5. The brotherhood that didn't need to be written. The relationship between Beaver and Wally felt natural in a way that many television dynamics struggle to achieve. And the reason for that wasn't found in the script, it was already present between the actors themselves. From the moment Jerry Mathers and Tony Dow met, there was an ease in their interaction that didn't require adjustment or rehearsal. That natural connection translated directly onto the screen, creating a dynamic that felt authentic rather than constructed. The more they simply behaved like themselves, the more convincing their relationship became, and that authenticity reinforced the emotional foundation of the show. What makes this even more significant is what happened after the cameras stopped rolling. While many co-stars drift apart once a project ends, Mathers and Dow maintained a lasting friendship, continuing to reconnect, collaborate, and support each other over the years. In real life, their roles were reversed. Mathers was actually the older brother, but that difference didn't disrupt the illusion. Instead, it strengthened it. Because what audiences were responding to wasn't just character structure, but genuine trust. That trust created consistency, and that consistency made their relationship believable across every episode. It wasn't performance, it was familiarity, and that's something no script can manufacture. Number 6. The decision to keep the stars unaware of their own fame. At the peak of Leave It to Beaver's success, when millions of viewers were tuning in each week, the young actors at the center of it all were deliberately kept from watching the show themselves. This wasn't an accident, it was a calculated decision. Producers believed that if the boys became aware of their own popularity, it could alter their behavior, making them self-conscious and potentially damaging the natural quality that defined their performances. So the solution was control. Parents were instructed to limit their exposure, creating a barrier between the actors and their own success. The result was a strange but effective dynamic. The faces of a generation had only a partial understanding of their impact, which allowed them to continue performing without the influence of fame. Tony Dow later admitted that he had not seen many of the episodes he appeared in, highlighting just how far that separation went. But that distance served a purpose. It preserved the authenticity of their performances by preventing outside perception from shaping how they acted. In a way, the show protected itself by limiting awareness, ensuring that what appeared natural on screen remained exactly that, unaffected by the pressures of recognition. Number 7. The moment a toilet changed television forever. In the 1950s, television operated under strict standards that defined what was acceptable for family viewing, and among those restrictions was something surprisingly basic: bathroom fixtures were considered inappropriate for display. That changed with a single creative decision in Leave It to Beaver. In the episode Captain Jack, the storyline required Beaver and Wally to hide an alligator, and the chosen hiding place, a toilet tank, immediately created tension with network censors. The idea of showing even part of a toilet was considered unacceptable, threatening the carefully maintained image of wholesome television. But the producers pushed back, arguing that realism required acknowledging everyday objects. The compromise they reached was precise. The tank could be shown, but the bowl could not. That small detail marked a significant shift. It demonstrated that television could evolve, even within strict boundaries, by introducing reality in controlled ways. What followed wasn't an immediate transformation, but a gradual loosening of restrictions, where everyday life became more visible on screen. That single moment didn't just solve a storytelling problem, it redefined what television was allowed to show, proving that even the smallest details can create lasting change. Number 8. The career that almost belonged to the Olympics. Before becoming Wally Cleaver, Tony Dow's life was centered around competitive diving, a discipline that required precision, discipline, and years of training. From an early age, he showed exceptional ability, eventually earning recognition as a junior Olympics champion and setting records within his age group. His trajectory pointed toward a future in athletics, possibly even at the highest competitive levels. But that path changed unexpectedly when he attended an audition with no serious intention of pursuing acting. What set him apart wasn't experience, it was presence. His athletic background gave him confidence, physical control, and a natural composure that translated effectively on camera. That combination made him stand out in a way formal acting training might not have. Once cast, his life shifted completely. moving from pools and competitions to scripts and studio lights. Yet the discipline he developed as an athlete didn't disappear, it became part of how he approached his role, maintaining consistency and control in every performance. What appeared to be a sudden career change was actually a continuation of the same underlying qualities, applied in a different environment. Number 9. Letting characters age was a risk. That paid off. At a time when many sitcoms relied on keeping characters unchanged to preserve familiarity, Leave It to Beaver made a different choice by allowing its characters to grow alongside the actors. This decision introduced a level of realism that set the show apart from its contemporaries. Beaver didn't remain a static child, and Wally didn't stay frozen as the dependable older brother. They evolved, and that evolution brought new challenges, new situations, and new layers to the storytelling. Viewers weren't just watching isolated episodes, they were witnessing progression over time, which created a deeper emotional connection. This approach required more careful writing, because growth introduces complexity, and complexity demands consistency. But the result was a show that felt more authentic, reflecting the natural changes of life rather than resisting them. By the final seasons, the characters had developed in ways that mirrored the audience's own experiences, turning the series into something more than entertainment. It became a reflection of growing up itself. Number 10. The rumor that became stronger than the truth. For decades, a rumor persisted that Jerry Mathers had appeared in I Love Lucy, a claim that spread widely despite clear evidence to the contrary. The origin of the rumor was simple. A resemblance between Mathers and a child in a specific scene led viewers to make a connection, and once that connection was established, it became difficult to correct. Even when Mathers publicly clarified that he had never appeared on the show, the belief continued to circulate. This reveals something important about how audiences process familiarity. When viewers form a strong attachment to a character, they begin to extend that character beyond its original context, creating connections that feel true even when they are not. In this case, recognition overpowered accuracy. The rumor survived because it aligned with what people expected, not because it was supported by fact. And that persistence demonstrates how powerful memory and perception can be, especially when tied to something as culturally significant as a beloved television show. Number 11. The finale that didn't end the story, it preserved it. When Family Scrapbook aired in 1963, audiences expected a typical sitcom ending, but what they received instead was something far more deliberate, a controlled closure designed to protect the show's identity rather than simply conclude it. Instead of pushing forward with new conflicts, the episode turned inward, using memory as its structure. The scrapbook wasn't just a prop, it was a narrative device that allowed the show to revisit itself, to reflect on what had already been built, rather than risk weakening it with unnecessary extension. That decision created a different emotional effect. Viewers weren't being asked to accept an ending, they were being guided through a process of remembering, which made the conclusion feel earned rather than imposed. The reveal of Beaver's nickname added a final personal detail, connecting the earliest moments of the show to its final scene. Even if some felt the explanation was simple, it served a larger purpose. It completed the emotional loop. What makes this finale significant is not what it introduced, but what it avoided. There was no escalation, no attempt to outdo previous episodes, no forced dramatic twist. Instead, the show chose restraint, and that restraint ensured that Leave It to Beaver ended exactly as it lived, quietly, deliberately, and with a level of control that prevented it from becoming something it was never meant to be. Number 12. The role that broke, the image that had trapped her. For years, Barbara Billingsley carried one of the most recognizable images in television history, the perfect mother, composed, elegant, and entirely controlled. That image defined her success, but it also quietly limited her future. After Leave It to Beaver ended, casting directors no longer saw a versatile performer. They saw June Cleaver, and once an identity becomes that fixed, it stops opening doors and starts closing them. Roles became repetitive, expectations became predictable, and opportunities narrowed. Then came a moment that disrupted everything. In Airplane, Billingsley stepped into a role that completely contradicted her established image. Speaking jive on screen wasn't just a comedic choice, it was a calculated break from familiarity. Audiences didn't just laugh because the scene was funny, they reacted because it was unexpected. The contrast between who she had been and what she was doing created a shock that forced viewers to reassess her. That shift mattered, because once an image is broken, it can be rebuilt in new ways. What had once restricted her suddenly became a tool. Her past identity didn't disappear, it became part of the surprise, and that is what gave the moment its impact. It proved that in Hollywood, reinvention doesn't always come from gradual change. Sometimes, it comes from one decision that challenges everything people think they know. Number 13. The ending that happened because it refused to compromise. Most television shows end when they begin to fail, but Leave It to Beaver ended while it was still strong, and that decision came from something far more intentional than necessity. Jerry Mathers reached a point where continuing the show meant giving up something more important: his education, his personal time, and the chance to experience life beyond the set. That choice forced the producers to confront a difficult question. Could the show continue without him? On the surface, it seemed possible. But at its core, the series wasn't built around a flexible concept. It was built around Beaver's perspective. Remove that, and the entire structure shifts. The producers understood that continuing without him wouldn't preserve the show, it would transform it into something else. And that was a risk they chose not to take. Instead of extending the series for short-term gain, they made a rare decision. They stopped at the right moment. That choice protected the show's identity, ensuring it would be remembered consistently rather than diluted over time. What makes this ending significant is not the fact that it ended, but how it ended. It reflects a level of discipline that is uncommon in television, where success often leads to overextension. Leave It to Beaver avoided that path, and in doing so, preserved its legacy. Number 14. The casting that worked because it wasn't planned. Tony Dow didn't enter the audition process. As a polished actor with years of preparation, he arrived as someone who naturally fit the role without fully realizing it. His background in competitive diving had already shaped his discipline, his posture, and his confidence, but none of that was intended for acting. And yet, those same qualities translated perfectly on camera. The producers weren't just looking for technical performance. They were looking for presence, something instinctive that can't be easily taught. Dow had it. He didn't overthink his lines. He didn't try to impress. He simply existed within the moment, and that authenticity made him stand out immediately. His lack of experience became an advantage, because it kept his performance unforced and natural. That is what made Wally Cleaver believable. What looked like a simple casting decision was actually the result of alignment between personality and character. The right person didn't need to be shaped into the role already existed within him. And once that connection was recognized, everything else followed. His performance didn't feel constructed because it wasn't. It felt real because it came from something genuine, and that authenticity became one of the defining strengths of the show. Number 15. The rule that protected the show by limiting its humor. In most sitcoms, success is measured by how often the audience laughs. But Leave It to Beaver followed a different philosophy, one that required restraint rather than exaggeration. If a line caused too much laughter on set, it was often removed. That decision might seem unusual, but it was deliberate. The show wasn't trying to compete with louder, more exaggerated comedies. It was trying to reflect everyday life in a way that felt believable. Excessive humor would disrupt that balance, turning moments into performances instead of experiences. By limiting the intensity of jokes, the producers preserved subtlety. The humor didn't come from punchlines, it came from situations, and that difference changed how audiences engage with the show. Instead of reacting to scripted jokes, viewers recognized familiar moments from their own lives. That recognition created a quieter, more lasting connection. It made the show feel real, and that realism became its strength. It proved that humor doesn't always need to be amplified to be effective. Sometimes, the most powerful moments come from restraint, where the audience isn't told when to laugh, they simply understand why. Number 16. Lee reunion that revealed what time had changed. When the cast returned for Still the Beaver in 1983, it wasn't just a continuation of the original series, it was a reflection of everything that had changed since it ended. The characters had aged, their roles had evolved, and the perspective of the story had shifted. Jerry Mathers was no longer the child at the center, he was now the adult, responsible for guiding a new generation. That transition created a layered experience for viewers who were watching both the characters and the actors move forward in time. But the reunion also carried a deeper emotional weight. Hugh Beaumont was no longer part of the story. His absence wasn't just noticeable, it changed the dynamic entirely. The show acknowledged this loss, incorporating it into the narrative rather than ignoring it. That decision gave the reunion a sense of realism that nostalgia alone couldn't provide. It wasn't just about returning to the past, it was about recognizing that the past cannot be fully recreated, and that awareness gave the revival a depth that made it more than just a reunion. It became a continuation shaped by time itself. Number 17. The town that felt real because it was never defined. Mayfield was never clearly located, and that lack of definition wasn't accidental, it was intentional. By avoiding a specific setting, the show created a space that could belong to anyone. Clues appeared throughout the series, pointing to different states and regions, but none of them were definitive. That ambiguity allowed viewers to project their own experiences onto the town, making it feel personal rather than distant. Instead of being tied to one location, Mayfield became a reflection of everyday American life. This flexibility strengthened the connection between the audience and the show, because it removed the barrier of geography. Viewers didn't have to relate to a specific place, they could see their own environment within it. The mystery of Mayfield wasn't meant to be solved, it was meant to remain open, allowing each viewer to interpret it in their own way. And that openness is what made the show resonate across different generations and regions, turning a fictional town into something that felt real. Number 18. The perfect image that was carefully engineered. June Cleaver's image appeared effortless, but it was the result of deliberate choices designed to maintain visual consistency. The pearl necklace wasn't just a stylistic detail, it served a practical purpose, helping to conceal a shadow on Barbara Billingsley's neck under studio lighting. Once that solution worked, it became part of the character's identity. The same approach applied to her wardrobe and posture. High heels were used to maintain height balance as the child actors grew taller, ensuring that the visual hierarchy of the family remained intact. Every detail was considered, not randomly chosen. The goal wasn't just to create a polished appearance, it was to sustain it across every scene. Over time, those decisions became invisible, blending into the character until they felt natural. What viewers saw as perfection was actually the result of careful adjustment and repetition. That process reflects how television constructs identity, not through a single defining choice, but through consistent refinement that eventually becomes expected. Number 19. The audition that succeeded because it wasn't trying to. Jerry Mathers didn't walk into his audition with strategy or preparation, he walked in as himself. Wearing a Boy Scout uniform and focused on attending a meeting afterward, he wasn't trying to impress anyone, and that lack of effort became the defining factor. Instead of performing, he simply responded, and that authenticity stood out immediately. Casting directors recognized something that couldn't be replicated through training natural presence. That moment defined everything that followed. It wasn't about skill, it was about alignment. The role of Beaver required someone who didn't feel like they were acting, and Mathers fit that requirement without trying. What seemed like coincidence was actually precision, the right person in the right place at the right time. And once that happened, the character became inseparable from the actor. Number 20. The actor who shaped the show from both sides of the camera. Hugh Beaumont's contribution to Leave It to Beaver extended far beyond his role as Ward Cleaver. By directing 23 episodes, he became part of the show's structure, not just its performance. That dual role gave him a unique perspective. He understood the characters not as written figures, but as lived experiences, which allowed him to guide scenes with a level of nuance that outside directors might not achieve. His approach focused on balance, ensuring that performances remained natural while maintaining the rhythm of the story. Colleagues often described his attention to detail, his ability to adjust scenes in real time, and his commitment to authenticity. That consistency helped define the tone of the series, keeping it aligned with its original vision. What made his involvement so valuable was not just his skill, but his understanding. He wasn't interpreting the show, he was part of it. And that integration ensured that Leave It to Beaver remained cohesive from beginning to end. In the end, Leave It to Beaver endures not because it was perfect, but because it understood its limits, protected its identity, and chose authenticity over excess. Behind every simple moment was a deliberate choice, and that's the real lesson. Lasting impact comes from knowing what not to change. If these stories gave you a new perspective, don't